Welcome to the Steroids Podcast with your host, Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Boom! Boom! Let's get started here. The Steroids Podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Guide to Roids, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Now, for the first time in bodybuilding history, you have someone with no corporate interests and no obligation to please anyone, not walking on eggshells to not offend. Ultimate Guide to Roids gives you the information, the whole truth, not a full truth and a half truth, full truth. Ultimate Guide to Roids gives you the keys to the Lamborghini, gives you the information, and lets you decide what to do with it. It's a crime this information has been suppressed this long. Now let's get on with the podcast. Okay, welcome to the Steroids Podcast. Got some great questions today that I'm excited to answer for you guys. The first question is from Zach. He says, bought and read your book, enjoyed it. I can relate to when you mentioned a lot of guys running long ester tests and being disappointed. Been doing lower dose Enanthate cycles for a while and didn't really get the well-being or mental boost I had hoped for. Do you think switching to Propionate, testosterone propionate, would help with this? Yeah, Zach, I definitely do think that switching to testosterone propionate would get you the effect that you're looking for. The thing with testosterone, and since 500 milligrams testosterone per week is recommended so much on the internet for being a first cycle for beginners, that is so widespread, and that's what most people are doing because it's just conventional wisdom. It's spread around so much on the internet that, you know, if you were new to this and you did something else, you'd be some kind of freak. You know, not really, but, you know, that's what probably people on the internet would think. You were some kind of freak. I wouldn't, though. It's disappointing. It's disappointing because the way that you have always imagined that being on steroids was going to be was that you imagined, you know, I'm going to be going to the gym and every workout I'm going to be getting stronger and my muscles are going to be growing. And I'm going to have extra energy and extra high sex drive and extra energy to take care of what I want to do in life and get done what I want to do in life. Targeting behavior, where I go after a target and hunt for my goals, you know? And so if you're not getting that, and instead it's like you don't really even notice that you're on anything other than you're more bloated and, you know, slowly over time, you get bigger and stronger in the gym. You might be a little more emotional too. But other than that, you don't really get much from 500 milligrams per week of testosterone solo. And since that's what so many people are doing for their first cycles, this is a really common way to feel. And, you know, during my cycle, I started by doing 600 milligrams of testosterone per week. I front loaded it the first week with 1,200 milligrams. And then, you know, after about a month, I was like, what the hell is this? I hadn't gained like any strength, you know, or like a little bit, just a little bit though, you know. It had been a month on steroids on 600 milligrams of testosterone per week. And I was not having the experience that I imagined I would. So I was like, man, this fucking sucks. Because, you know, when I made that decision to get on steroids, like, it was not because I wanted to mess around, okay? It's because I had serious goals and I wanted to work towards them now. And so, you know, waiting a month and, you know, being a bit bigger, more bloated, and, you know, a little bit stronger, you know, yeah, I broke my natural plateau, right? But that was all it did. And I was pissed because I was just like you, man. I had that vision in my head of like, this is what being on steroids is going to be like. It's going to be like this crazy, powerful experience. And you know what? The majority of guys, the huge majority of guys,
are not going to have that experience on 500 milligrams per week of testosterone. I met guys in Thailand. Guys would come over, made friends with a bunch of guys from YouTube. My Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand YouTube channel. So a bunch of guys came over to Thailand, and some of them would do their first cycle while they're there with me, because they'd have access to pharmaceutical grade testosterone from the pharmacy made by Bayer. So they're like, yeah, now's the time. And they would be on 500 milligrams testosterone. They'd have, they had already decided that they're going to do that before they came to Thailand. And, they'd say, yeah, I'm going to do this for like 8 weeks or 10 weeks or something, right? And I'd be like, I'd know what their goals were because they had talked to me, and I'd be like, okay. And I would know that like they were going to be disappointed, and then they would always start adding stuff in after like 4 weeks, adding like D-ball or like Winstrol or Trenbolone. So that's what I did, on my first cycle, after 4 weeks, after the first month, when I was saying, I was bigger, a little bit stronger, I had broke my natural plateau, and I was a little bit bigger, and also I was more bloated. I was like, man, this sucks. This is not what I was expecting. This is not what I signed up for. And so then I was like, screw this. I'm going to take Tren. And so I got on that Tren Acetate, and it took about 3 days, man. I was taking 100 milligrams every other day to start out. And you know what? After about 3 days of that, I started to see what I wanted. So, getting bigger, stronger, the look of my body changing, the look of my physique, the outline or the silhouette of my physique. You can always tell the silhouette of a bodybuilder, because a silhouette of a dude that's juiced up, he's got this look, and I call it a tiered look. T-I-E-R, like tiers, like steps on a ladder or steps on stairs. It starts with this, one level is the traps, and then the next level is the shelf under the traps where the clavicle is, and then you see it go out again when it hits the shape, go out again when it hits the shoulders, and then it goes out again when it hits the triceps, and then it goes out again when it hits the forearms. Like it's like a tiers or steps on a staircase. That's what the outline or the silhouette of a bodybuilder looks like. And so within 3 days of starting the Trenbolone, the Tren Acetate, those characteristic looks about being a bodybuilder started to appear on my physique. So that was the cosmetic effect of steroids, where it fills your body out in a certain way, in a certain androgenic, masculinizing way, and it fills your muscles out and gives them that characteristic on steroids shape. And a lot of guys, they can't tell what this looks like because they don't know what is natural and what's not. But once you've used the steroids, this becomes very obvious to you. Because you experience this the first time you experience the cosmetic effect of steroids, where you start taking something like Dianabol, or you start taking Superdraw, or you start taking Trenbolone, something that really has a big sledgehammer, wham bam pow, thank you man, thank you ma'am, wham bam pow, thank you ma'am. That kind of a physique, that kind of a change to your physique, that kind of an effect. And it takes like 2 or 3 days. That's most of the strongest orals and Trenbolone, of course. And when that happens, you see it happen right in front of your eyes. And forever after that, you are able to pick out people who are on steroids and not on steroids, like see fake Natty and not fake Natty. You're able to see this forevermore after you experience this for the first time. It's like this knowledge of good and evil, bro. This knowledge of good and evil. You take a bite of the forbidden fruit, the Trenbolone, the Dianabol. You take a bite of that forbidden fruit, and all of a sudden, you are bestowed with the knowledge of good and evil. It's pretty crazy. It's going to be interesting. All these guys, they always tell me, you were right. After I took it, I could see like half the guys in my gym were on something. But you just can't tell when you're natural. There's something about being natural where like there's this block because you've been fed lies all your life and you just don't know the difference. But then when you're natural and you know you're natural, and then you take that strong sledgehammer steroid for the first time, and you see in the first few days that cosmetic effect where you get the outline of a bodybuilder, like overnight. It takes about 3 days, sometimes 4 days, sometimes 5 days. It gives you that knowledge of good and evil. And then, you know, picking out people who are on steroids and who are not on steroids from then on, it's like looking at a blonde and looking at a brunette. You know, it's so easy. So you're going to take a bite of that fruit. As far as Zach's question about being disappointed and asking like, yeah, should I switch to testosterone propionate? Yeah, I would say definitely do that. So if, you know, testosterone propionate should be taken every day. That it like gives a come up effect. So you take it in the morning and it gets your day like kicked off with an energetic start because it peaks about 2 hours later. And then it stays elevated throughout the day. And then on the second day, it drops off sharply. And by the end of the third day, it's gone out of your system. So when you take like a testosterone propionate, if you take 700 milligrams per week, usually it's dosed at 100 milligrams per milliliter. So you take 1 milliliter per week. And that turns out to 1 milliliter per day. And that turns out into 700 milligrams of testosterone propionate per week. And it's a great dosage, and it's also a great feel-good effect. If you've ever wanted to know, or if you felt disappointed because you didn't know, what it feels like to be on roids during your cycles of 500 milligrams of testosterone and enanthate per week, if you switch it to propionate and do the dosage of 700 milligrams per week, one shot every day of 1 milliliter when you wake up, okay, you'll know after that. You'll know what it feels like and get that feeling of being on roids and being juiced up, right? And actually, testosterone propionate actually does give more of a like cosmetic effect to your physique. It gives you more of that pumped up look than testosterone and enanthate does. You know, it goes against it's a bro science thing that the testosterone propionate and the testosterone and enanthate have different effects. But man, when you experience it for yourself, I don't know how anyone could say that the effects aren't different. Even though it's like unexplainable, we have theories about why, even though they're both testosterone, they're just connected to a different ester molecule. Why would it be different? They're both testosterone in the blood once they get released from the ester. Well, there's something about the speed at which it hits, and that seems to affect the perceived effect of the drug, what you experience mentally, but also what you experience physically. Not to mention, testosterone propionate is more potent per milliliter. So we've talked about this before, but there's this thing called the ester weight, okay? So testosterone enanthate is testosterone molecule plus enanthate molecule, okay? And then testosterone propionate is testosterone molecule plus propionate molecule. Okay, so there is 100 milligrams of that testosterone enanthate or testosterone propionate, okay? And in that 100 milligrams, part of it is testosterone, and then the other part is enanthate, or the other part is propionate, okay? So an enanthate weighs more than propionate. Enanthate weighs about 30 milligrams per milliliter. So if you have 100 milligrams of testosterone enanthate, you've got 30 milligrams, roughly 30 milligrams of enanthate and 70 milligrams of testosterone in the 100 milligram per milliliter testosterone enanthate. But propionate is a lighter ester. It doesn't take up as much weight. So it's about 90% testosterone and 10% propionate. So in 100 milligrams per milliliter testosterone propionate, you have 90 milligrams, roughly, of testosterone and 10 milligrams of propionate. So per milliliter, per 100 milligrams, testosterone propionate is about 15% stronger than testosterone enanthate. because there's more milliliters per 100 milligram. Sorry. There's a lot of milli and milligee words here, okay? There's more milligrams per milliliter of testosterone in propionate in 100 milligrams of propionate than there is in 100 milligrams of enanthate. Woo! Got through it. A lot of tongue twisters in there. Started twisting up my tongue, guys. All right, next question is from Pat. Yo, Dan, I have a few more. How about what is the best size of syringes to use? What are the benefits of using insulin needles instead of using like 25 or 23 gauge to give injections? He also asks about expired testosterone. Okay, so we'll answer those questions. All right, so the size of the syringe, the best needle depth is 1 inch. 1.5 inches is a bit long. That's like pretty freaking long. And when you're going in 1.5 inches, you're more likely to hit some kind of sensitive thing on the way in. And I hate doing that. So if you have a 1 inch needle, it's the best of both worlds. 1/2 inch is the bare minimum, and you can only inject into lean areas of your body with a 1/2 inch needle. And you got to really make sure that thing is buried and like pressed in, like you're actually putting pressure to make sure that it's in there, because if you don't do it deep enough, it can spill out of the muscle. The oil can spill out of the muscle and get into the subcutaneous fat and skin tissue, and it just makes a mess. It makes a big allergic reaction and swelling and pink and redness. It's a freaking mess. So that's why you want to inject with a longer needle, like a 1 inch. And when you do the injection too, you bury the needle all the way to the hilt, okay? You don't leave part of it sticking out. You bury it to the hilt, okay? No matter what needle length you're using, you always bury it to the hilt. So all the way in. Okay. And then, like, my favorite gauge is 27 gauge, because that one is still big enough to kind of get most oil through. Just barely, though. And it's pretty small, so it doesn't hurt. 25 gauge doesn't really hurt too much either. But 23 gauge kind of hurts like a bitch, because that's kind of like a small straw. So I like using small needles as I can, the minimum thickness. And I prefer 27 gauge. You can even do it through a 29 gauge. So if you use a 1 milliliter syringe, there's better leverage pushing down the plunger. So it's easier to push steroid oil through a 1 milliliter syringe than it is through a 3 milliliter syringe. Because the barrel is thinner. It's long. It's a more long and thin structure in a 1 milliliter syringe than a 3 milliliter syringe, so it has better leverage. So you can push thicker oil through smaller needles with a 1 milliliter syringe than you can with a 3 milliliter syringe. So if you use that, you can use a smaller needle to do your injections, and then just do 1 milliliter injections. As far as testosterone past its expiration date, it slowly degrades over time. After it reaches the expiration date, then over the course of like a year or two, it starts degrading, and the molecules of the testosterone start breaking down and metabolizing. So it won't be as potent the longer it is expired. Next question. TRT and always hungry. Is this normal? Also, last blood test showed really low sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG. Is that a good thing, or should it not be so low? Greetings, Domien from Belgium. Okay, Domien. Yeah, TRT makes you hungrier. Having higher testosterone levels, you get hungrier. Steroids in general, but testosterone especially, is an appetite stimulant. They're known for that. They're known for producing that effect. They increase your muscle cell insulin sensitivity, and so your muscles actually take sugar out of the bloodstream and other nutrients out of the bloodstream much more effectively and efficiently, and just more of them are taken out of the bloodstream because of that increase in muscle insulin sensitivity. So you're going to be going through your blood sugar quicker, and on steroids you'll have more times that you feel desperate or frantic or just really anxious about eating because your blood sugar will drop if you're eating a lot of carbs, especially if you're eating not clean food. And you'll get these blood sugar crashes or swings, like reactive hypoglycemia sometimes, but sometimes it's just the muscle cells stealing all the sugar out of your blood, stealing all the blood sugar. And, you'll feel real desperate for food and need food bad, fast. So it stimulates appetite, just taking testosterone injections. So that's why your experience is that on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. That's completely, absolutely expected. So if you have low SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin, that's a good thing, man. So sex hormone binding globulin binds up the testosterone in the blood and makes it unable to attach to androgen receptors. And androgen receptors are the things that your muscle cells and all the cells throughout your body use in order to communicate to the nucleus and DNA of the cell and tell it to do what it does, okay? And so androgens like testosterone or steroids in general, they come in the blood and they attach to those receptors, transmit a message, and then the androgen receptor transmits that message to the nucleus of the cell, and then you get the effects of being on steroids. That's that's the main way that steroids do their thing and work in the body. So if you have a high sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG, then that would mean that you have less testosterone available in your blood to be able to go and do that, attached to androgen receptors. And if you have low SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin, that's great, because that means that you have not a lot of sex hormone binding globulin in your blood stealing your testosterone from you and making it not be able to attach to androgen receptors. So how to reduce sex hormone binding globulin is taking steroids in general reduces sex hormone binding globulin, but there's a few steroids that do it really effectively and potently, and those are 25 milligrams of Winstrol per day, 25 milligrams of Proviron per day, or 25 milligrams of Dianabol per day, or Trenbolone in general. Those steroids have studies done on them where they specifically reduce sex hormone binding globulin more than other steroids, and they did it in the studies at those dosages. So the next question is thoughts on running Anavar without test. I'm a Muay Thai fighter, so it's not ideal to bulk up but want to burn fat and get lean. Yeah, the thing about Anavar is that it's not very strong, so you got to take a pretty high dosage of it, especially if you're not going to use testosterone. Really what you should do is you should take a little bit of testosterone, okay? Because when you take the Anavar, it's going to turn off your natural testosterone because your body sees the Anavar in your body. I know that there's some studies showing that natural testosterone is not completely suppressed on Anavar, but it's like the more you take it and the longer you take it, the more your testosterone does shut off. Okay, so it's progressive in nature. And, you know, if you want to have the effects of the Anavar, then you got to have some testosterone in there. That's your natural body's hormone. You can't just be replacing the testosterone that you produce naturally with Anavar. It doesn't work good like that. So if you are going to do that and do Anavar only without test, then you need to take like more than 60 milligrams per day, and it needs to be really good quality, like legit Anavar, or else you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be like super disappointed. It's not going to do much for you. But the way that I would advise doing it would be to take 1 cc, 250 milligrams of testosterone per week. That's not going to bulk you up, and it's actually going to make you recover from your Muay Thai workouts quicker and more effectively. You'll be stronger and more able to take on a high workload with your training because of the testosterone. And then the Anavar would be like, throwing steroids on there. That's where you would start feeling like, real powerful, is when you had that 1 cc of testosterone to help you out, and then you threw the Anavar on top, and it's going to be like, damn, this is really doing what I want it to do. And so if you have legit Anavar, something like 40 or 50 milligrams on top of per day, on top of 250 milligrams testosterone per week would be great. And then just make sure that you have some anti-estrogen tablets with you. So like buy 1 box of Arimidex or something. You could buy 1 box of Arimidex, like 30 tablets or whatever, if you can find that. And you need to find it if you're going to run the cycle, because you might have some estrogen side effects from the testosterone. If you're going to run steroids in general, you got to have anti-estrogen tablets on hand. Just in general, guys, if you're going to take steroids, it's stupid to do it without having like some Arimidex or exemestane or letrozole. You're just asking for trouble. All right, next question. David. It's from David. Hey, Dan, what are your thoughts on tamoxifen Nolvadex? Restrict to PCT only? Yeah, that's pretty much what I think. Nolvadex, it's not really the most healthy stuff, and it also reduces your IGF-1, so it makes the growth hormone that you naturally produce not work as well. And so it's just better like not to take it. And people use it as an anti-estrogen on cycle to prevent from getting gyno, but that's like pretty much all it does. It doesn't kill systemic estrogen the way that Arimidex or exemestane or letrozole does. Instead, it just blocks it at the receptor, okay? So, and it blocks it the best and selectively. That's why it's called a SERM, a selective estrogen receptor modulator. It blocks it really well at the nipple. It selectively blocks for that tissue. So, when you're running your cycle, it's better to just take Arimidex or exemestane or letrozole, because that actually kills the estrogen and removes it from the body. So you don't get any estrogen side effects. You remove that bad health problem having high estrogen in your body when you're using steroids with those anti-estrogen, anti-aromatase tablets, AI. But with the Nolvadex, you can use it for PCT, and it's a good PCT drug at like 20 to 40 milligrams per day. It's a good PCT drug to help get your balls working again and producing sperm and producing natural testosterone. But it also can be used to shrink gyno. So if you do have gyno and you have like a hard lump underneath your nipple, that's what gyno is, okay? Gyno isn't so much like having some fat around there or something. You can just diet that off. But if you've actually got like a lump under your nipple and you can feel it, and it feels like BBs or like frozen peas or something like that, it like feels textured and kind of rough, like that's gyno, okay? That's breast tissue development. And everybody has a gland down there, okay? So if you feel something, if you reach down there and you feel something behind your nipple, that's normal. That's not gyno, okay? But if you feel like this, textured ball thing that is, not small at all, it's not normal. You'll know the difference, okay? You'll know the difference. And, that is gyno, and that can be shrunk using Nolvadex to starve it of its estrogen source. So what you can do is you stop using steroids, okay? So you go off steroids so that you're not having any estrogen being produced in your body, okay? And then you start taking the AI, the anti-estrogen, like Arimidex. You take that at a normal dosage, like a few times per week. And then you take the Nolvadex at like 40 milligrams per day, like 20 to 40 milligrams or even 60 milligrams per day while you're doing that and you're not on steroids. And it will shrink that little like lump behind your nipple if you have it. It'll shrink that thing down, starving it of estrogen and killing a bunch of those breast tissue cells. So that is another use for tamoxifen, Nolvadex. Next question is from John. Hi, I like your YouTube videos. There's a lot of truth in them that most people don't talk about or ignore. One question I had, do steroids cause the immune system to crash or lower it? Yeah, in some ways they seem to make the immune system work better, but then in other ways they seem to make it not work good. So if you're taking like oral steroids because they have some liver stress to them, if you like go drinking or something, you'll usually have a pretty bad hangover, and also you'll be susceptible to illness because, like, yeah, obviously alcohol lowers your immune system, and then when you combine that with your body already being under stress from the oral steroids and the liver stress, it can oftentimes result in you like getting a cold or getting sick and it lingering for a long time. So generally getting drunk is like not something that you really want to do a lot on steroids in general, and especially not on oral steroids, because chances are you'll get sick from a lowered immune system from that. Generally though, if you're in good health when you're on steroids, like you're mostly just using testosterone and, you know, maybe you're using some growth hormone, or maybe you're using, you know, some Anavar or some Primobolan, or just light stuff that doesn't really, you know, affect your health much, some Deca, something like that. You know, even if it is in good dosages, but you're still going to have good blood work on that kind of stuff, and you're still going to be healthy while you're using it. And that actually seems to boost the immune system, because other than when I do something stupid, like drinking or something like that, I'm not getting sick. You know, most steroid users don't get sick. They don't get sick unless they do something stupid, or unless they're like harming their health with the steroids they're taking. When they're like abusing steroids or something and their health is having problems, then yes, the immune system is definitely lowered, and they're more likely to contract illnesses. All right, next question. This one's also from a guy named John. The next question is from Elvish. I just find that my belly button pops out recently. I don't feel sick or painful, but my friends advise me that reduce the dose of HGH because my growth hormone belly is quite big. I asked my coach, but he doesn't think it is not side effect of human growth hormone. Do I need to see a doctor? Well, so if your belly button popped out, you have a hernia, okay? So when your belly button pops out, you know, when you are a baby in the womb, in your mother's womb, you know, you had an umbilical cord and it was attached where your belly button is, okay? And that's how you like fed, and also how you got rid of your waist when you were developing. But as far as that umbilical cord, it had to go through your developing stomach muscles. So naturally, babies have a hole there, okay? Because that's where the umbilical cord was. And that's, so there's like a hole in the muscle there. But then after you are born and the umbilical cord falls off, then the muscle, the hole in the muscle closes up, okay? But it's a weak point. It's a weak point for your whole life. And so when you are like under a lot of pressure in the gym, doing stuff like squats and deadlifts and rows, you know, like all those practical real world strength type of exercises, and you're putting all this tremendous pressure on your stomach muscles, and then you're doing things that grow things, like taking growth hormone. Well, you know, that weak point right there where your umbilical cord used to come through, that weak point in your abdominal muscles, you know, it closed up though, but it's still a weak point in everyone. It may grow. It may grow a little bit, and you may develop a hernia. So I had a hernia. I had an umbilical hernia. And you know what? it did start it started after I started using growth hormone. So, you know, that's a thing. You see a lot of guys that are big get that hernia, and part of it is just from growing bigger in general. But I think growth hormone does contribute to that. I had to get surgery on mine because, you know, when you get a hernia there and your belly button starts popping out, that's your intestines protruding. And it sucked having the hernia because I'd always be like pressing it in, and like my finger would always be going to that spot, pressing that hernia back in. And I was like, what the hell is this? So I did not like that. And so I went to a military doctor in Thailand, and there's a picture on my Instagram of me standing doing a little bicep pose with the 5 cutie Thai nurses that were taking care of me in the hospital, and they're all smiling. And I have this blood collector bottle around my waist because there was a drain tube coming out of my stomach draining blood, and that was because of my umbilical hernia. So that was not fun. I don't like to get hernias, and yeah, it's fixed now. There's a patch there now. It's patched up. You can kind of see the patch because they add a mesh to reinforce your belly button. You know, funny thing about that was that I was in the hospital for 3 days, and that was in Thailand at that military hospital, and they were, you know, had all those cute Thai nurses in their little uniforms taking care of me. And then, you know, I was getting morphine around the clock, so I like felt freaking incredible. And you know what? The whole thing only cost me about $550. The whole experience, including the operation and the surgery. You know, that was a lot different than it was in Colombia. I was at the best hospital, one of the best hospitals in Colombia in South America when I was dealing with my leg. And that's why they were able to give me such incredible treatment there. So that one was not cheap surgery like the Thailand hernia surgery. When I had the steroid leg infection and I got that taken care of in Colombia, it was many surgeries. It was 4 surgeries, all in succession, not just one surgery. And it was at one of the best hospitals in South America. When I went to the first clinic, when I first decided I got to get this taken care of, the doctors at that clinic, they told me they couldn't treat me. And then they sent me to this hospital that I ended up at. And so, yeah, that surgeon there, man, he saved my life, and I was really dependent on him. He was a Colombian man, and man, he was a good man, and he took care of me, and I was really dependent on that guy. So I was very, very proud of his work. He did a great job patching me back together through a bunch of different operations, and man, I will forever hold respect and like love for that guy, like in my heart. That surgeon that saved my life there, he really worked on me over a couple weeks of surgery after surgery. So that was freaking amazing. But so hernias, I mean, if you get really big and strong and you're lifting, you know, once you're deadlifting, you know, over 500 pounds, and you're squatting with, you know, if you're squatting below parallel, you know, more than 3 plates or 3.5 plates, 4 plates, like that kind of comes with the territory. You know, you're probably going to have some kind of injury at some point if you're lifting so heavy like that, because like the human body just isn't meant to handle those kinds of weights. So it's really fun, and I mean, I do it, but it comes with risk. So hernias are something that happen. They're not too uncommon. They happen. All right, the next question is from Mad Scientist. He said, what do you think the cycles Arnold and people from his era used to run? I want to get a physique like the guys from Arnold's era because I like the look and think it's healthier. Basically, I'm just trying to get a somewhat classic looking physique. Yeah, I like that too. Me too. I'm going for the same thing as you. So with the cycles that they ran, what's really cool is that Rick Drayson on YouTube, he was one of Arnold's training partners back at Gold's Gym, and he talks about what they used and what kind of diet they ate over there back at Gold's Gym Venice in the 60s and the 70s. And so we get a lot of this information. Obviously the dosages that he says is like toned down, because people don't talk about, like IFBB pros and just people in general, like that talk about on the open air, like dosages that bodybuilders use or dosages that they use. They don't say the real dosages that they use, for one thing, because they feel like, well, if people do this, that could get them hurt. So it's like liability. And then for another reason, it's like not politically correct, and it makes the bodybuilders look kind of like stupid or something, because this is being huge like that requires drug abuse, and like winning competitions and stuff like that, it like requires drug abuse. So it's not a good look, and it's not flattering, and if you're heavily involved with that, you've got a lot to lose. So that's why people don't talk about the dosages that are correct. But what they used back then, like the Arnold and those guys, it was mostly D-ball. Like Dianabol is what they were building up like their muscles on. Sergio Oliva and Larry Scott, Mr. Olympia, Arnold, D-ball was a big part of it. So they'd take D-ball tablets throughout the day, not once a day. Take 5 milligram D-ball tablets throughout the day. And they'd usually take Deca, something like 400 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams of Deca per week. And because they knew that steroids orals work better with an injectable run in there. And the thing with Deca is that since they wouldn't use any testosterone, they would just use the Deca. And when you do that, it doesn't have a big effect on hair loss the way that testosterone does. And also it allows you to still have like a sex drive and like functioning libido and stuff. So when Deca is paired with testosterone, then it starts giving you side effects, because it does a bunch of weird stuff in your body when it's mixed with testosterone. So if you just do Deca alone, you're going to avoid a bunch of side effects. So basically what they would do is Deca and D-ball, or Deca and Winstrol, or Deca with Anavar, and Arnold would get Primobolan. So Arnold used Primobolan too, especially around contest. He would use Primobolan from Europe, him and Franco Colombo, and whoever they shared their Primobolan stash with. So that's what they used back then. And they also used cadaver growth hormone. They used this stuff called Crescormon. And what Crescormon is it's pituitary glands from human cadavers, and they grind it up, the pituitary gland, and they purify it into a growth hormone extract. And it's got a bunch of different, it's not like the pure rDNA 191 amino acid growth hormone that is made today. It was a growth hormone extract from the pituitary gland, and they'd inject people with this stuff, and it was super, super strong. So it was an experimental drug. It was mainly meant from kids who were like had genetic diseases to make them be growth hormone deficient and not grow. But some of it got diverted to bodybuilders. And also NFL football players like Lyle Alzado, who had that brain disease with the prions that killed him, and he was famous because he was a NFL player that said like steroids killed me. And it wasn't steroids, it was actually cadaver Crescormon human growth hormone that he was injecting while he was playing in the NFL in the 70s. That's what killed him, because prions are misfolded proteins, and sometimes people would have a disease called Creutzfeld Jacob disease, and then they would have the cadaver growth hormone that was contaminated with the bad prions from the Creutzfeld Jacob disease, and it's contagious. So then when these people would inject themselves with those growth hormones, the Crescormon, just a few people, there was a little bit of contaminated Crescormon, but it happened to, at at least like a good little group of people, and Lyle Alzado was one of them. It goes and attacks your brain, gives you Creutzfeld Jacob disease, and 1 year after contracting that, you die. So that's what happened to him. That's what killed him, not steroids. Now they make a human growth hormone by rDNA, recombinant DNA technology. So the way the growth hormone is made now is they use viruses to go and make genetic changes to E. coli bacteria, and then the E. coli bacteria starts producing the human growth hormone, and then they collect that and purify it. It's crazy. So they actually genetically engineer the E. coli bacteria to produce human growth hormone. That's how rDNA 191 amino acid pharmaceutical grade human growth hormone is made these days. It's manufactured by genetically modified, genetically engineered E. coli bacteria. It's great stuff. Very pure. All right. Next question. Juicer asks, what is the strongest SARM? Okay, the strongest SARM, selective androgen receptor modulators, they're like an alternative to prohormones, okay? Because some people, they'd be sad and like, oh my God, I wish that I was around and did bodybuilding back when prohormones weren't banned yet. And, if you feel like that, well, there are SARMs out there, and these are about as strong as prohormones were, maybe even a little bit stronger. So they're legal anabolics that actually work, because selective androgen receptor modulator, it works on your body, on your androgen receptors, the way that Nolvadex works on female estrogen receptors. It's a molecule that is not a steroid, okay? It's not a hormone, but it's a molecule that still affects the receptors, that it tricks the receptors. The receptors think that this molecule, the SARM, is a hormone, and so they get activated and do their effects, okay? That's how SARMs work. So S23 and LGD-4033 are the best muscle building SARMs and the strongest SARMs, okay? S23 gives a really strong effect where like 30 to 60 milligrams per day produces emotional outbursts, like pretty potent roid rage in pretty much everyone who takes it, myself included. Like not roid rage, okay, but that's why I say emotional outbursts, but yeah. And surprising emotional outbursts. Also really intense sweating in the gym, being all shiny in the gym, and giving a good pump and like a good muscle boost. Like you feel it in the gym. S23 at 30 to 60 milligrams, it's strong stuff. And then LGD 4033 at 10, 15, 20 milligrams and up per day. Like about 20 milligrams has about the same anabolic effect on my body as about 250 milligrams of testosterone. So 250 milligrams of testosterone injection, I would compare the anabolic effect, the muscle building effect, to be the same as me taking LGD 4033 at 20 milligrams per day. So those are what I think are the strongest SARMs. And check out bodybuilderinthailand.com, because I do written reviews on some SARMs on there. So look for my written reviews of S23 and LGD 4033 on bodybuilderinthailand.com. Okay. Duke asks, what are the best steroids for beginners? Okay, the best steroids for beginners are the ones where you're going to have the least other side effects other than muscle building, okay? And so steroids that produce estrogen or produce prolactin, stuff like that, produce female hormones, that's going to give you side effects, and then you're going to have to start using drugs to tinker with it and mess around with it, and some more than others. So if you use high dosage testosterone, then you're going to get effects from having high dihydrotestosterone and high estrogen, because those are two products of testosterone injections. They get made in the body out of the testosterone that you inject. Some of the testosterone is converted to estrogen and dihydrotestosterone. Those both give side effects. But those only really give much side effects if you're taking more than like 500 milligrams per week. So to make it even more simple, for beginners, they should use 250 milligrams of testosterone per week, because then, if they're not going to have any DHT, dihydrotestosterone issues at that dosage. Most likely not, and those issues would normally be like swollen prostate, difficulty peeing, or a weak pee stream, or like deep cystic acne that was deep under the skin. Those would both be DHT side effects, but that would be really uncommon, especially at that dosage at 250 milligrams per week. And then the other thing would be estrogen produced from the testosterone, and you take care of that. You might have no estrogen side effects at all on that dosage of testosterone, but if you did, then you probably wouldn't need more than like 1 or 2 tablets of Arimidex or Exemestane or Letrozole per week. And you'd be able to easily take care of that if you ever felt any symptoms like itchy, burning, hot, or sensitive nipples or anything like that. When you feel that, well, just sometime during that day, go take an anti-estrogen tablet like an Arimidex. Just take 1 tablet and it'll go away in a couple hours, and that'll be that. So 1 cc of testosterone makes handling those kinds of side effects simple, okay? And then the other thing that you do is you just take another anabolic steroid, so a muscle building steroid, and one that is going to give you a cosmetic effect, because you're going to want to get that really good workout feeling in the gym, and you're going to want to see that immediate effect or change in your body, and get that experience of being on steroids and feeling like you're on steroids and being in the gym on steroids. I know you want to feel that. So you're not going to want to use an oral that is going to cause a lot of more side effects. And an oral is just easy to take too. So it's easy for a beginner. For beginners, I always think that they should just take an oral steroid and stack that with 1 cc of testosterone. So, Winstrol, Anavar, Turinabol, even Superdrol. Those are going to be probably the easiest ones to take, with Superdrol being a little bit more problematic, just because it can be kind of toxic. It could affect your eyes or affect your liver a little bit if you take it, or if you're really sensitive to it and you take it at a high dosage or something like that, or for more than 5 weeks. But those other ones, Winstrol, Anavar, oral Turinabol, you know what? You take those, you take like 50 milligrams of any of those per day, and you pair that with 250 milligrams of testosterone per week, and you're going to have a great cycle. And the only side effects you're going to have is just like feeling great, looking great, and getting great pumps in the gym and shit like that. If you do have any side effects, it will most likely just be a little bit of estrogen side effects, and like some itchy, burning nipples that you notice one day, and then you just take that Arimidex tablet or Exemestane tablet, and it will go away in a couple hours, and you probably wouldn't experience any other side effects other than that. Or on a cycle like that, you might get pumped throughout the day, or you might get like pumps in your feet when you're walking on hills or something like that, but those cycles are going to be relatively side effect free. And now, if you don't want to shut your natural testosterone production off when you do that, you could take HCG at the same time. You'd take something like 1,000 IUs HCG per week while you took the steroids. So you'd split it up into 2 injections and take 500 IUs twice per week, and do that the whole time that you took the steroids. And then your balls wouldn't shut off and they wouldn't shrink while you took the steroids. And generally you'd want to do those cycles for like 8 to 10 weeks. If you're worried about liver toxicity with the orals, you'll know if you start getting tired or feeling kind of sick or like losing your appetite, that you're probably feeling toxic. And so just take a break for 2 or 3 weeks. And then, if that happened after like 4 weeks or something, you could do something like 4 weeks with the orals and then 2 weeks off and then another 4 weeks. And then that would end up being 10 weeks. And that would be a great first cycle. For beginners, that's not going to have side effects. There's not going to be a lot of troubleshooting. There's not going to be any major side effects, and there's not going to be a lot of need for troubleshooting having problems. It's going to be simple, easy, and straightforward. And I think that that's what the guys who are beginners are looking for. They're looking for a big effect, a nice bam, and a nice quick change to their body and quick change to the way they feel when they're working out in the gym. You know, get those crazy pumps, get that experience of being on roids, but not have to do a bunch of troubleshooting, messing around on side effects, or having a bunch of new stuff happen that they're not prepared for. So that's what I think. 250 milligrams of testosterone with Turinabol, Anavar, or with Winstrol at something like 50 milligrams per day. 4 weeks on with the orals, 2 weeks off with the orals. 4 weeks on with the orals. Take the testosterone for the whole 10 weeks. That's my opinion.
If you would like your questions to be answered on the Steroids podcast, go to steroidspodcast.com and leave a comment with your questions, or email or private message steroidspodcast@gmail.com or steroidspodcast on Instagram. Until next time.